Top 10.
Hello my friends, I'm Red Spirit Mask and I've been studying the cultures of Africa for 14 years, and in that time I've seen my fair share of masks, so I decided to compile a top 10 list of some of the most gigantic masks ever made in Africa. I base the rankings of this list on how big a mask is when measured in a single dimension, either height, length, or width. Overall mass is not factored in, so even though the Kakunga masks from the Congo have a great overall mass, they did not make the list. Also, as a rule, I'm only featuring masks that have been accurately measured, so even though, for example, this Katso mask from Cameroon is visibly huge, because its measurements were never recorded, I did not consider it for this list. And lastly, the costume is only included if the face and body are inseparable from each other. Alrighty, now that you know the rules, let us begin!
Number 10.
The first mask on the list is the Adonai Mask from the Kurumba people of Burkina Faso. This slender antelope mask is a height of 170 centimeters, or in other words, 5.5 feet. Yes, that's right folks, our first mask on the list is already the size of some adults, and it only gets bigger from here. These Adonai masks are very important to the Kurumba people. Each one is given the name of a deceased elder. The masks are used for several purposes, one being that they represent clan ancestors during funerals when male and female elders were led to the burial ground, and another purpose they had was to either be part of an altar or be altars all on their own, and the Adonai had other functions as well. And it's worth noting that this isn't the only African mask that was used as an altar on this list, but before we get to that mask, we need to move on to
Number 9.
Remember when I mentioned that for some masks, the face and body are inseparable? Well, our first example of this on the list is the Egongun Mask from the Yoruba people of Nigeria, which, to be honest with you, for years I'd been pronouncing that as Egongun Mask, because, well, I am an American after all. Anyway, the largest example I found of the Egongun Mask is a lofty 200 centimeters, which is 6.6 feet tall. The name Egongun means powers concealed. This refers to the fact that the Egongun costume conceals the identity of the dancer in order to reveal the power of the ancestor spirits. Egongun come in many varieties, not only reflecting the diversity of the massive population of the Yoruba people, but also because this tradition has even made its way overseas. This mask can be found among the diaspora populations of Brazil, Cuba, Barbados, the Dominican Republic, and even the United States.
Well, hey there, now that there is America, land of the Fritos, home of the burgers and titties, so I am well within my constitutional rights to pronounce this here mask as Egongun. Right? Right? Okay, maybe not.
Typically, an Egongun is put together over time with overlapping layers of both local and imported cloth of the highest quality that a family can afford. Its many panels celebrate all the members of the family, both alive and dead. Said panels fan out in every direction as the dancer sways and dips with his fashion drip. As I stated before, the Egongun come in many varieties, and for some costumes there is actually a separate carved headpiece, but many Egongun, like the large one we're highlighting today, are made without any such carving. Another type of attachment that can be included are strands of cowries that show the family's wealth. I suspect that our example has lost quite a few of those cowries over time, seeing how its front panel seems to have a number of empty patches. And speaking of the front panel, it's made of a mesh that the dancer is able to see through. Like many masks on this list, the Egongun story goes much deeper, but we must move on to our next mask on the list, which is
Number 8.
This charming hyena mask, when measured lengthwise, spans 203 centimeters, which is 6.7 feet. The museum that has this mask does not provide much cultural information, or even a proper title for this mask, which unfortunately happens with rather frequent regularity with many cultural objects in museum collections. But at least the name of the culture that this mask belongs to is stated. This mask was bought from a Lwena artist who works for the Zambian National Dance Troupe. The Lwena, aka Luvale people, are part of the Vakachinyamacha Mukuwamai cultural group, which also includes the Chakwe people, the Mabunda people, and the Luchazi people. Among the Vakachinyamacha a masquerade character is known as a Likishi, which is Makishi when pluralized. So even though we don't have a specific name for this hyena character, we can at least refer to it as a Likishi mask. There are over 100 Makishi characters, and their numbers grow over time. These masks are best known for performing at male initiations and chiefly ceremonies, but their uses go even beyond that as well. There's obviously a lot more about the Makishi that we could talk about, but we can save that for another time, so let's continue on our list.
Number 7.
This sawfish, known as oki in the Igbo language, is a type of mask that is worn horizontally on top of the head. It represents a Bini Oru, a water spirit, and although the tradition of carving water spirit masks originated among the Igbo people, this style of masquerade exists among neighboring peoples as well, like the Abua and Ekpeya. In fact, the Abua made an almost equally lengthy crocodile mask that I almost put on the list, but at some point I decided on a rule to not include masks that are related to each other. So, since the water spirit mask representing the sawfish was 6 meters longer than the crocodile, the sawfish is the one that gets on the list. This oki water spirit mask measures in at an impressive 227 centimeters, 7.4 feet. I should also mention that besides aquatic animals, sometimes human features are integrated with the animals and other strange things to form a striking and anomalous design. It's thought that the reason for this stems from the fact that the Igbo associate water with the free flow of ideas and goods. When these masks enter the village, they arrive via canoe to appear in yearly festivals, which honor the water spirits who will ensure good harvests of fish and food crops. They have quite a few other functions as well. One rather unique ceremony the mask participates in is a purification ritual in which towns are swept clean of pollution, which personally I think many parts of our world, including my home country of America, would benefit greatly if we had a ceremony based around cleaning up pollution.
Number 6.
Next on our list of giant masks is the Amantashal Natisho, which means Master of Medicine, and on some French sites I've seen it called Mbonchon. This particular Mbonchon resides in the famous Louvre Museum of France, and as for its measurements, it comes in at 240 centimeters, 7.9 feet tall. This style of serpent mask is danced by the Baga, Nalu, and the Landumon peoples. It embodies a serpent spirit associated with water, rainbows, wealth, and fertility. In addition to bringing prosperity to mankind, Amantashal Natisha also fights against evil. When it emerges from the forest, it glides smoothly across the village's rice paddies to preside over village events. And the most notable of these events is the initiation of boys into adulthood. Now, just like the serpent mask, let's glide toward our next destination.
Number 5.
Coming in at number 5, we got the gorgeously geometric Bedu Mask. The largest I found is 275 centimeters. That's 9 feet. So much feet. These are the masks of the Nafana people and their neighbors who live in the border of Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana. The Bedu masks typically dance in male and female pairs. This particular gigantic Bedu mask is one of the female masks. We can identify her as female not only because the female Bedu mask is always larger than the male, but also because she has a disc above her head, whereas the males have a crescent-shaped design. Though it seems very likely that the male and female represent the crescent moon and the full moon respectively. According to the book African Cosmos, this interpretation has not yet been confirmed. But what we know that does associate these masks with the moon is that they dance according to a lunar calendar. And there's also the fact that these masks perform frequently during a time the Nafana call Bedu month, when the moonlight is said to be very bright. The Bedu Mask utilize lunar energy to benefit society in a number of ways. For example, they have curative powers and can promote fertility. And that's not their only role in society either. You can learn more about the Bedu Masks in my old Moon Masks video, but in the meantime we still got plenty more masks here to talk about that are even bigger.
Number 4.
The Chewa people make a very unique mask, constructed from a wooden frame that they cover with woven corn husks. This 300 centimeter, 9.8 feet tall example of the mask is shaped to look like an antelope. It is known as Cassia Maliro, the consoler of souls and the spirit mother of the Gule Wamkulu, aka Enyao, which is a masking association comprised of many characters who represent the spirits of the dead. These masquerade characters dance at funerary celebrations that take place in the village. At midnight, Cassia Maliro visits the home of the deceased and circles their graves. After the spirit mother has communicated with the departed, she leads these souls to the forest during the dawning of the sun. When they arrive, the huge basket-like mask is set ablaze and burned to cinders. When the fire smoke disappears into the wind, the spirits of the dead follow it into that wind and become ancestral spirits that are now capable of interacting with their descendants and the universe. Boys who are being initiated into the Enyao Association will eat the ashes of Cassia Maliro in order to render them immune to what the Chewa call the hotness of the spirits of the dead. Now, seeing as the Chewa had a mask that was almost 10 feet tall, you must be wondering, will we see a mask that exceeds 10 feet? Well, the answer is yes, we will.
Number 3.
In our number 3 spot, we have a mask from the Bois people, one of the first cultures I was introduced to in my study of Africa. The Bois and their neighbors like the Nunuma and Wimiama are famous for their plank masks, and although we've discussed these masks on previous videos, I don't know if I've ever shown you their biggest mask. This towering serpent mask, known as Doho, is a staggering 419 centimeters, 13.8 feet tall. When the mask is danced, the performer twists his head from side to side, which causes the flexible snake body to look like it's undulating like a real snake. The serpent is seen as a positive character among the Bois people, and as for why that is, we'll look at a quote from Dr. Christopher D. Roy. In the village of Pa, the people tell of an ancestor who accompanied a war party on a surprise attack against a neighboring village. The party itself was surprised and ambushed by their neighbors and fled for their lives. The ancestor crept into the burrow of a great serpent, calling out to the serpent that he intended it no harm, and if it protected him, he would honor it with a mask. When he returned to his village, he commissioned a mask that was so long and slender it attracted great crowds at market day dances, who spent their money in the village market and contributed to the well-being of the community.
Number 2.
The Igbo people make an incredible variety of masks, but one stands taller than the rest, and that is the massive Ejele mask. Most of the Ejele have never received a fully accurate measurement. What do I mean by fully accurate? Well, for example, the other day, I was looking at the website for London, England's Horny Man Museum, and for the Ejele in their collection, they describe it as being about 12 to 15 feet high. Egods, man, why on earth can't they give us a more accurate height? Does no one in the Horny Man Museum own a measuring tape? Perhaps if you weren't so horny all the time, you could afford some measuring tape instead of spending your cash on some gormless sussy dojinshi. Luckily, there is another Ejele I know of that does have a singular measurement given for its height, and it resides in a very unexpected and unusual location. It can be seen at Disney's Animal Kingdom Lodge. Yep, you heard me right, this thing is at a Disney World hotel. And it's not the only African artwork at Disney World either. In fact, Disney owned one of the largest collections of African art on Earth, much of which was eventually donated to the Smithsonian National Museum of African Art. But some of it is still owned by the Disney Company. And you can find some of that African art collection decorating the Animal Kingdom Park and its companion hotel. Considering all the African cultural objects they own, you'd think the company would have made an animated film based on an African myth or folktale by now. But nope, the dastardly Disney dopes ain't done shit. Anyway, getting back on track, this massive Ejele mask reaches 488 centimeters high. That's 16 feet! Having said that though, according to the book A History of Art in Africa, some Ejele were even larger. The book states that in general, Ejele may be 16 to 18 feet tall, which in the metric system would be 548 centimeters. It's also worth pointing out that the book states that the Ejele tend to weigh about 200 pounds. That's 90 kilograms. And all that weight is danced by a single individual. What's the dancer's trick to performing while carrying so much weight? The answer is, there is no trick. The dancer who wears this mighty mask is just really, really strong. In its original Nigerian context, it's sometimes referred to as the King of Masks, and traditionally would only dance during the funerals of highly respected men. This King of Masks is certainly deserving of its own video, and that's why I decided that we will go in more depth about this exceptional mask in a future video. Now, before we reveal the most gigantic mask in Africa, it's time for some honorable mentions. First off, as some of you may know, I'm very fond of the Bale people's Keple mask, and sometimes these things come in big chungus size. But, for a number of reasons which may take too long to explain, I decided not to include them on this list. But don't worry, if I ever make a video about my top 10 favorite masks, we can feature the Keple there, as well as many other masks that were not present today. Second honorable mention goes to the Karanga mask of the Mosi people. Due to their unique history, the masks that the Mosi are most known for are made by a group within the Mosi who are related to the culture that we'll be highlighting in our number 1 spot. So for that reason, I cut them from the list. One more very important note I'd like to share is that today's video is part of the South of the Sahara collaboration project, which includes multiple different YouTube channels. Each of them has put a lot of work into their African history videos, so please remember to check out the playlist that will be linked at the end of the video. Now it's time for the final giant mask.
Number 1.
The last part of our journey to find the most gigantic African mask brings us to the country of Mali. Here we find the enchanting land of the Bandiagara escarpment, home to the Dogon people. No doubt some of you have seen the famous Dogon people before in a documentary, and in that documentary you likely saw the massive Sirigi mask. This is not the largest mask. Towering though it may be, the Sirigi stands in the shadow of a colossus. There exists a far more elusive mask among the Dogon, which the Sirigi can be seen as a public and visible representation of. The final mask we seek is Imina Na, the Great Mask. Very few photos exist of these vitally important masks, and the photos that do exist are often of low resolution. The image on screen now is one of the better quality photos, but it is also one of the smaller great masks. This one is only 279 centimeters, 9.2 feet tall, which is larger than many of the masks on this list, but not large enough for the #1 spot. However, as you can see in this historic illustration, the Great Mask sizes have a vast range of heights. But an illustration will not do for our list. We want photographic proof. The photo you are about to see is over 100 years old, so I ask that you please forgive the quality of the image. It shows a great mask resting horizontally on its side. It is currently the largest Iminana mask that I have seen in photos that has an accompanying measurement. This Dogon Colossus, the Great Mask, is 750 centimeters, 24.6 feet. And yet, there are said to exist great masks that are even larger still. But before we get into that, let us discuss what makes this mask so great to the Dogon people. The masks of the Dogon, like many African masks, have an important role in funeral events. That said, these masks also relate to Dogon life as well. Masquerades are controlled by a powerful ritual organization known as Awa, which almost all Dogon men are initiated into. The Great Mask, also known as the Mother of Masks, is the most powerful of all masks within the Awa. The Great Mask is rarely worn and instead functions as a ritual altar. Its presence transforms the surrounding area into a place of mystical exchanges and is the monadic source of energy for all other Dogon masks. Iminana thus serves as an emblem of Dogon's spiritual life. Every 60 years, the Awa carve a new Great Mask in preparation for the Sigi ceremony. This mask commemorates the legend of Lebe Seru, the first man to die in Dogon mythology. Therefore, the Sigi ceremony simultaneously celebrates an entire generation of elders and commemorates the replacement of one generation by the next. According to the book, A History of Art in Africa, this final fantastic mask can be as gigantic as 1,524 centimeters, 50 feet tall.